This week on The Watchman, we visit a powerful memorial to the victims of the 9/11 attacks, and it's found in Israel, another symbol of the special bond between the United States and the Jewish state, one that's never been stronger.
On two of the most important core issues of the conflict, Jerusalem and the issue of Palestinian refugees, the Trump administration, the president personally, seeming to take Israel's position and accept Israel's position, and also trying to pressure the Palestinians through the power of the purse.
Plus, Israel is heading to space. Get the inside story on how the Star of David may soon be planted on the moon. It's The Watchman. It's Christians United for Israel only on TBN. And welcome to The Watchman. We are in a very special place in the hills just outside of Jerusalem. This is the 9/11 Living Memorial. It's the only memorial in the world outside of the United States that features the names of the nearly 3,000 victims of the 9/11 attacks. As you can see, folks, it's a beautiful place. It's a peaceful place. It covers about 5 acres of land here. We're right near the entrance to the city of Jerusalem, and the centerpiece is the monument you see behind me, about 30 feet high. It features the American flag, but kind of turning into a torch at the top. The torch is a uniquely Jewish symbol. At the base of the monument, we have actually a piece of the melded metal from the Twin Towers from that awful day, September 11th, 2001. So this is a touching place, a poignant place, a peaceful place, but you might ask, why do we have a memorial to 9/11 in Israel? After all, the attacks happened in the United States, but folks, think about it. No nation has experienced the horrors of terrorism more than Israel. As the 9/11 attacks were unfolding, at the same time, right here in Jerusalem and throughout the land of Israel, we had the Second Intifada raging. Hundreds of Israelis were killed as a result of suicide bombings, shootings, and other acts of terror. So as Americans were mourning their loved ones on 9/11, Israelis were doing the same right here. We are kindred spirits when it comes to the fight against radical Islam, against terrorism. Look no further than the 5 Israeli citizens who were killed in the 9/11 attacks. One of them was a dual Israeli-American citizen by the name of Daniel Lewin. He may have been the first person killed in the 9/11 attacks. He was on board American Airlines Flight 11 with the likes of Mohammed Atta, the notorious al-Qaeda hijacker. Reportedly, Daniel Lewin, this veteran of the Israeli Special Forces, may have tried to confront the hijackers. He was stabbed from behind in a cowardly act, but he may have been the first casualty of 9/11. An Israeli, a veteran of the Israeli Special Forces. So it should really come as no surprise that Israel features this stirring 9/11 living memorial. No nation can relate to the horrors, the effects of terrorism like Israel can. And again, Israel is a free and open and tolerant Western-style democracy. We not only share common enemies, the United States and Israel, but we also share common Judeo-Christian biblical values. It's an unbreakable bond, and we're really at a high point for U.S.-Israel relations. The Trump administration, the Netanyahu government have a great relationship, and you could argue that the Trump administration is really the most pro-Israel administration in American history if you look at some of the policies. We spoke to Owen Alterman, senior international affairs correspondent for the I-24 network, about the latest in U.S.-Israel relations and what you should look for in the special relationship. Take a look. Well, Owen, we are here at the 9/11 Memorial, really a symbol of that bond between the U.S. and Israel. We're at a very interesting time in the relationship right now. What is the impression, the reaction from Israelis, first of all, to the Trump administration, which seems to be one of the most pro-Israel administrations probably in American history?
Eric, the reality is, by and large, Israelis love Trump. There was a poll taken in July showing that 72% of Israelis have favorable views of Donald Trump. On the margins, there's some criticism of the president, maybe some concern about his consistency, maybe some concern in parts of the establishment about things like cutting the funding for the refugee agency, UNRWA. But by and large, the Israeli street, and also we should say the Israeli establishment, very, very happy with this president.
Oh, and he needs to tweet out those Israeli approval numbers. They're big. Okay, a lot of his policies right now, look, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, obviously, pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. Another issue is the recent closure of the Palestinian Liberation Organization's offices in Washington, D.C. Why is that such a big deal?
Well, it's a big deal. First of all, it's a symbol. It's a symbol that the Palestinians had this mission in Washington that's now being closed. It's also important because, Eric, it's part of a bigger picture that you've described of the Trump administration putting pressure on the Palestinians, backing Israel's positions on a lot of the core issues in the conflict. It's also important because of the specific reason why the mission was closed. And what's that? The Palestinians saying that they're interested in taking Israel to the International Criminal Court and having the International Criminal Court potentially prosecute Israelis. John Bolton, National Security Advisor, and the Trump administration pushing back against the court, not only on the issue of Israel, but on the issue of the United States as well. Because the Palestinians took that step, opened the door for the Trump administration to take this step in closing the Palestinian mission.
Yeah, and the Trump administration says they have a peace plan in the works. They're going to bring it to the table eventually. But it seems like they are pressuring the Palestinians maybe to come to the table, to make some concessions. Is that maybe the thought?
Well, Eric, this is a president who seems to see the world through the prism of carrots and sticks. And with the Palestinians, he seems to have a lot of sticks in his hand that he's using to try to bring them back to the negotiating table. Again, on two of the most important core issues of the conflict, Jerusalem and the issue of Palestinian refugees, the Trump administration, the president personally, seeming to take Israel's position and accept Israel's position, and also trying to pressure the Palestinians through the power of the purse, through closing that mission. Again, the question is, will this work? And where is that peace plan? We've been talking about this deal of the century and the peace plan for a very, very long time. It's still not out on the table, leading to a lot of speculation about where it is and if it will ever be on the table.
Yeah, overall, I would think the Netanyahu government is very pleased with the way things are going in the relationship with the U.S.
No question about it.
The Iran deal, Jerusalem, refugee issue, the embassy or the mission closing in D.C. So the government contacts, Owen, I would think have been stronger than they have been in quite a long time.
By everything that we see, Eric, that's absolutely the case. These are two leaders who are very, very much on the same page.
Unlike the previous U.S. administration with the Netanyahu government.
There was certainly a lot more tension under Barack Obama. No question that the government here very, very pleased with the positions the Trump administration has taken. We should also say that people on the Israeli left or in the Israeli center have an interesting way of looking at Donald Trump. You know, Avri Gilad, a leading television personality here, writes an op-ed a few months ago where he basically says of Donald Trump, "I can't stand you, but I love you." Meaning that I'm not blind to all of the controversial things about you as a person, but on the other hand, I really love your positions you're taking towards Israel. And how do I balance the two? And it's something that you see in the center and the left here in Israel as well.
What are your personal thoughts on the U.S.-Israel relationship? And as an American native, just your comfort level here in Israel and what seems like an unbreakable bond?
It's obviously a very special relationship. It goes back to the founding of the state and intensifies in the 1960s, 1970s, and then even more so towards the end of the century and now under the Donald Trump presidency. On the other hand, there is a bit of a cloud on the horizon, and it has to do something with 9/11. 9/11 was one of the milestones in the widening of the partisan gap on Israel. The fact that Republicans have such a more favorable view of Israel on average than do Democrats. And while people here really welcome the support from Republicans, from American conservatives, from evangelical Christians, there is a lot of concern here about what's happening on the American left and what's happening in the Democratic Party. One of the reasons, Eric, that this relationship has been special, one of the reasons that it's thrived is that it's been bipartisan, that it doesn't matter who's in the Oval Office, it doesn't matter who's in the White House, there's still a certain baseline of support. And even as you talk about Barack Obama and the tensions that there were between the Obama administration and the Netanyahu government, Barack Obama still supported an increase in military assistance to Israel that's now coming into effect. There's a kind of baseline of support. And there's the question, as this partisan gap widens, if that will continue to be the case. And people here are very, very concerned about it.
Coming up, we head from here in the world's spiritual capital, Jerusalem, to the political capital of Washington, D.C., where we will get the inside story on why the Trump administration's recent decision to pull funding from the UN's deeply flawed Palestinian refugee program could be a game changer here in the region. Don't move.
In 1948, Israel was reborn as a nation. The last 7 decades have been miraculous. Despite all the wars, all the terrorism, and all the sacrifice, Israel has thrived. The people of Israel are alive and well. God kept his promises to the descendants of Abraham. Christians United for Israel has put together a small booklet to inspire and empower you about Israel's past, present, and future.
The rebirth of modern Israel is one of the greatest miracles of the last century. CUFI's Israel at 70 booklet is an invaluable resource for anyone interested in how Israel has survived and thrived despite overwhelming challenges. Call Christians United for Israel at 210-477-4714 or go to cufi.org/watchman to receive your free Israel at 70 booklet.
And welcome back. The goal for any refugee is to one day not be a refugee anymore, to have a permanent home for yourself and your descendants as soon as you can. When it comes to helping refugee groups around the world, the UN seems to have the same view, except when it comes to the Palestinians. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, also known as UNRWA for short, has actually perpetuated the Palestinian refugee problem in a disastrous way. The Trump administration, to its credit, figured that out early on and recently cut all U.S. funding to UNRWA. We caught up with Middle East historian and Palestinian refugee expert Asaf Romarowski in Washington, D.C. to find out why this was so important. Take a look. We're talking about this organization, UNRWA, this alphabet soup, UNWRA. Tell us, first of all, what UNRWA is for our viewers who might not know, and secondly, why it's so vital that the Trump administration pulled funding from this organization.
Sure. UNRWA is uniquely defined a refugee like no other refugee population worldwide. And what is unique about UNRWA actually is the lineage aspect. The definition of an Arab-Palestinian refugee, according to UNRWA's accords, is anybody who was in mandatory Palestine between 1946 and 1948, and the kicker is, and their descendants. Nobody else has that lineage aspect. Wow. So when you talk about numbers today, how is UNRWA talking about we have millions of refugees, where they all come from? It stems from the actual aspect of the lineage. And only Palestinians have the element of inheriting refugee status.
Out of all the refugee groups in the world, and there are many, many refugees, just think of the Syrian refugees right now, a very hot issue. Out of all of those refugee groups around the world, only Palestinian refugees are in a situation where their descendants are also considered refugees.
Correct.
To the tune of 5 million now.
6 million in the most conservative accounts. So I've come across in my research between even to 8 to 10 million, depending on who you ask. And you're correct. I mean, since World War II, there have been millions of refugees who've all been resettled over the years. It's only the Arab Palestinians who continue to exist. And that has to do with the fact that, to my mind, and this is what my research has basically unearthed over the years, is that Palestinian identity is synonymous to Palestinian refuginess. So when you tell a Palestinian you're no longer a refugee, you say you're no longer a Palestinian. So it's much easier to maintain them in the stasis, which they've done, and you can find quotes all the way back from Nasser all the way to individuals like bin Laden and Saddam Hussein and others who've all said, we're never going to rest until we solve the Arab-Palestinian refugee problem. Right. It's a vehicle of economic warfare. It's become a vehicle of actual warfare, all against the state of Israel, holding Israel accountable for this reality.
The Palestinian refugee issue, if the UN had its way and UNRWA had its way, this UN arm, would never end. And those numbers of Palestinian refugees would just keep increasing and increasing. That's very important for many reasons, chief of which is they are demanding a right of return.
Right.
to Israel, Israel would cease to be a Jewish state.
Well, that's exactly the point. So the right of return and the entire demand for a right of return is actually the entire raison d'etre of UNRWA altogether. So long as there is an existence of a right of return, or a so-called right of return, and I highlight the word right because it is seen actually as a divine right, and arguably within Palestinian society, I would argue that no Palestinian leader feels that he has the mandate to give up this collective right. So nobody dares to put it on the table. And so what you have is that UNRWA has become the gatekeeper of the right of return. So long as, again, the numbers continue to grow, UNRWA is in business. I mean, no bureaucracy has any desire to go out of business. And so it's the only population where Palestinians and their constituency continues to grow. I mean, actually, UNRWA today is the largest employer of Palestinians in the tone of 30,000 individuals, all working for the cause. And so they've basically taken over the agency and are basically running it. UNRWA does no vetting when it comes to terrorism. When you apply for an UNRWA job, you doesn't say, were you ever a member of a foreign terrorist organization? Actually, being a member of Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad is diversity. And so UNRWA...
The UN, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. Over the years, UNRWA have said they've done a better job on vetting, but when it comes to American foreign policy, and for that matter, Israeli foreign policy, UNRWA has refused to use our own watch lists because they say that our watch lists are tainted. So you could be a driver, ambulance driver, a teacher by day, and a member of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad or Hamas by night.
And Asaf, I think the key point here in all of this talking UNRWA is American taxpayer dollars.
Yes.
We're helping to fund this organization until recently.
Right.
This is a very timely story, obviously, because the Trump administration recently announced they're cutting funding to UNRWA. Why is that so important, and what comes next?
By tackling the right of return head on, and by extent UNRWA, because UNRWA is the gatekeeper of this right of return, or so-called right of return, I would argue, then this is actually taking this off the table, because no Israeli government, left, right, or center, will ever accept the full right of return. It would alter the demographic majority of the state of Israel.
It would cease to be a Jewish state.
Exactly. And interestingly enough, the sister organization of UNRWA is UNHCR, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. Their definition, which is actually more interesting and more to the point, is only one generation. If you took that one generation definition based on the birth rate of the descendants of 48, 49, you would come with no more than between 25 and 30,000 individuals. And you could call it a day, a right of return.
So that'd be 25 to 30,000 Palestinian refugees, Asaf, as opposed to 5 or 6 million,
Correct.
which the UN is recognizing now. It's a slight difference there.
Slight difference, exactly.
Folks, it's so refreshing to finally see a U.S. administration hold Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority accountable for their refusal to work towards peace and accept Israel's right to exist. Well, coming up after the break, Israel goes to the moon. See how the Israeli space program is breaking new ground and how the Star of David will soon be planted beyond the stars. It's the Watchman. It's Christians United for Israel, only right here on TBN. Don't move.
This year, 25 countries were represented at the 2018 CUFI Washington, D.C. Summit, the most ever in our 13-year history. They came and joined over 5,000 others in our nation's capital as we continue to stand in solidarity with Israel and the Jewish people. They celebrated and rejoiced at the annual Night to Honor Israel. At 4.3 million members, CUFI is the largest, most diverse pro-Israel organization in the nation. For Zion's sake, we will not keep silent. And for Jerusalem's sake, we will not be quiet. From near and far, we are one. From all over the world, we are united. We are CUFI.
And welcome back. Only 3 countries have ever landed a spacecraft on the moon. Now Israel is about to join them. In December 2018, an Israeli nonprofit organization called Space.il will launch a spacecraft that will land on the moon in February 2019. By the way, those other 3 countries are the United States, Russia, and China. So once again, Israel is punching far above its weight. Here's more.
my vision is that this will do for Israel what the Apollo did for the United States. I think it'll give us a sense of genuine excitement. It'll give us a sense of achievement. It'll demonstrate that Israel is a startup country, that we have tremendous ingenuity.
The important capability is that it's small, it's using very low-cost systems and avionics, and it's making the moon reachable, which it never was before. Going to the moon was a hugely expensive government-run mission, and this is going to be the first privately run mission to the moon.
Our vision is to inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers in Israel, but hopefully all around the globe, and to show them through this landing, through this spacecraft and process, that science and technology can be exciting. And we hope that they will realize that we're building this spacecraft, but they will be the one that will build the next one.
For the first time, at very high resolution, map out the differences and how the lunar rocks are magnetized in all different directions. And these represent an enigma right now. We know since the Apollo days that the lunar rocks are magnetic, but nobody can figure out how they got magnetized.
The next phase is finishing the assembly of the spacecraft that you see behind me. Then we're going to go through a very long and arduous testing process on the spacecraft, then ship it over to Cape Canaveral, send it to space, do a very complex orbital maneuvers until we capture the moon, and land, and clap like crazy.
To do this and put it all together, it's taken almost 8 years. Remember, we're not an industry that's involved in it. We're a group of individual people who got together and have done something.
You have to do whatever is needed to make that possible. And like I always tell everyone I present to, and everyone that hear that, I really wish that they will do whatever is needed to make their dreams come true, because it's just, if you dare, you can achieve that.
Wow, it's going to be a real thrill to see the Israeli flag planted on the moon. Amazing things are happening every day right here in Israel. And up next, I'll have some final thoughts on how followers of Jesus can help the Jewish people continue to make this land blossom for years to come. Stick around.
In spring 2019, join Holocaust survivor and historian Irving Roth on a once-in-a-lifetime remembrance tour through Poland. His story of loss, survival, and hope will bring the pages of history to life as you walk through the streets of the infamous Warsaw Ghetto, the silent barracks of Nazi death camps like the one where Irving slept at Auschwitz, and the memorials to the heroes who risked their lives to rescue their Jewish neighbors from Hitler's evil plan. You'll be inspired and challenged to put your faith into action. You'll have the opportunity to interact with the local Polish Jewish community and meet with the daughter of a famous hero of the Holocaust, one of the righteous among the nations honored by the State of Israel. Take advantage of this rare opportunity to walk with and learn from Irving Roth as he takes you on a journey of his memories of life before, during, and after the Holocaust. To register for this historic trip to Poland with Kufi and Irving Roth, go to the Kufi website and sign up today.
And welcome back. We like to say that what's happening here at Christians United for Israel is a revolution in the church. Never before in history has there been a mass movement of Gentile followers of Jesus who are standing openly and boldly with God's people and God's land. And the Jewish people are taking notice. One of them is Al Newman. He's author of a great new book called Good Heart, that describes the beautiful relationship that's developing between Christians and Jews these days and how Israel is at the center of it. Take a look.
It really begins with my childhood. I was born and raised in central Pennsylvania. Very few Jews in the town. I was the only Jew in my high school class. So all my friends were Christian and I had a great relationship. My family moved there. My grandfather moved into that little town in 1899. My father took over a little clothing store, and we had nothing but good relations with our Christian friends. The sense of the Christian Zionism and Jewish Zionism, the interweaving of that, an American story and an Israeli story, and even though the story also touches on Austria, as well as Ethiopia, as well as Israel, I think that's a unique storyline. And like anything else, I think it was a perfect storm. I had an idea for a story, which I think is an engaging story. I had the motivation, we'll talk about that, and I also had the knowledge base, both the practical knowledge of what it was like to be pro-Israel, as well as because the book is actually set in Indiana in the late 1950s. I wanted to find a way to educate about the state of Israel. I wanted to do it with a novel, not nonfiction. And I wanted to find a way to talk about the miracles of Israel. I wanted to talk about the lone soldiers. I wanted to talk about the Ethiopian Israelis, talk about a story of perseverance. They were in isolation for 2,400 years, and they maintained their love of Israel for all that time. I wanted to talk about the wonderful marriage, the wonderful partnership between Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists. It's a little bit like Shakespeare's Henry V. We few, we band of brothers. And I think this book is my way of trying to tell a story to help people learn something about the state of Israel. It's a gentle story, it's a peaceful story. And I think when you come away from this book, you've learned about Israel, you've learned about the miracles of Israel, and you're something of a student of the modern state of Israel.
Again, folks, the book is called Good Heart. It's really a moving and inspiring read, and you can pick it up wherever books are sold. The book of Zechariah says that a day is coming when 10 people from all languages and nations will take firm hold of one Jew by the hem of his robe and say, "Let us go with you because we have heard that God is with you." We are living in Bible times today. You see the information there on your screen, so join our movement at Christians United for Israel for such a time as this. Well, thanks for joining us this week on The Watchman from Jerusalem. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.